Hey, how's it going? My name is Mike Squires, and this is Couchers Podcast, episode number 173. And my guest, Pete Anderson. Pete Anderson is most well known for being the guitarist for Dwight Yoakam for nearly 2 decades. He also produced Dwight's records. He's an outstanding producer, produced a number of other records, still producing records, still making his own music and records, still performing, save the last year, of course, and is currently working on a book and accompanying video called How to Produce a Record, which is amazing. I can't wait to read and see this. He's also got a few very cool signature model guitars through Reverend Guitars. I have one. In fact, I bought one on this podcast when I had Ken from Reverend on, because he announced that very guitar on the podcast, and I was like, I'll take one. Very exciting. So, man, what a good time talking with Pete. I had the pleasure of seeing him play at the guitar store in Seattle a number of years ago, a couple times. And great storyteller. I mean, unbelievable player. And I learned a lot in this conversation and had a really great time hanging out. So I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did, because I loved it. If you are enjoying the podcast, please support us at Patreon. We are creating cover song videos as well. If you're not aware, I assume you are. But your support goes directly toward the creation and the promotion of those videos. And help, really, it's what makes it happen. So thank you so much if you're already supporting. And please and thank you if you're considering patreon.com/couchriffs. That's also the only place where you can download the audio for these cover songs. So there's that. Thank you also to River City Guitars in Spokane, Washington. rivercityguitars.com and at River City Guitars on social media. Make sure you follow them on social media. Things go up on the on their Instagram and sell quick. They have a new website launching very soon with a ton of amazing inventory. Bobby's a very good friend of mine. If you have something that you are looking to sell, it could be a collection, it could be, a couple of cool things, vintage, used, boutique stuff, give them a shout. sales.rivercityguitars@gmail.com. I wouldn't send you anywhere that I wouldn't go myself. They're also carrying the Marvin Guitars CN90, so look for that. That's the guitar that I co-designed with Marvin Guitars to celebrate the 100th episode of the podcast. So they'll have one. The Guitar Shop New York City in Brooklyn has one now. If you guys are in either of those areas, Spokane or Brooklyn, go check those guitars out because they're amazing. Let's see. That's about it. This is Mr. Big. He wanted to say hello. Don't forget the golden rule. Treat people the way you want to be treated. It's not that hard to not be an asshole, just in general. That's it. See ya.
Sorry I'm late.
Hey, no worries, man.
I went to Salvation Army. Drop a bunch of crap off. I thought I had enough time.
Yeah, no worries, man. You never have enough time to do any driving around in LA. That's the thing.
Yeah, you get caught. I kind of stay on my side of town. And then I think we've all been spoiled by COVID because there was no traffic.
Right.
So it was like, this is LA, but I can go anywhere I want and there's nobody on the road. But now it's starting to heat up again.
I took a free left on Canal Street in New York. That's unspeakable. Free left.
Wow. That is. Yeah, I bet it was a ghost town for a while.
All the way across town in 10 minutes.
Isn't it? Yeah, it's a trip.
Crazy.
Yep.
that ship has sailed already though.
Where do you live? Where do you live?
I'm up in the Hudson Valley.
Wow.
I'm like,
Beautiful.
you ever play at Levon Helm's place?
No, I know about it.
Oh man,
Uh,
you got to play there.
it's beautiful, isn't it?
Oh, it's amazing. That's like 45 minutes from my house. I've cruised over there and seen some shows.
I bet. Wow. I was a big fan of Levon, and I haven't played the Hudson Valley, but I can't remember the place. There was a place everybody played, and it wasn't the Hudson Valley. It wasn't that far to go up. It was, I forget the name. It was kind of a little resort area. This guy had a famous little, held like 30 people I can take, and they all had they had to buy dinner, and it was, what was that place called? Pierpoint or
Piedmont?
No, I can't remember. If I told you, you'd know it. It's a well-known club up there.
Piedmont.
Yeah, Piedmont. It was it was a trip. It was a trip. The place was really a trip. A lot of people had played there though.
You're staying busy though. You stay busy.
Yeah, I I didn't anticipate it because of the state of the record business is such that there is no record business. I mean, it's really become depleted and compartmentalized. So you have. I mean, I don't need to tell you. It's obvious on any billboard or any chart or even on your radio. So I just did some custom projects. People wanted to make a record. They had some money because I'm not going to make anything that sounds anything near like modern Nashville country. That's out of the question. And even in my heyday, it was pretty much out of the question. LA and New York, they don't sign songwriters anymore. And if they do, they're on little labels that don't have much money. So, I used to make records that cost a minimum of 150 to 175,000. Now, if somebody has $25,000 to make a record, that's deluxe.
Yeah.
That's the difference. So in the middle of, prior to the pandemic, this band came to me out of the blue, Sarah Shook and the Disarmers, and they're on Bloodshot, and they're out of North Carolina. And she'd made some noise in the Americana world and just the music world. She got some nominations for some stuff, best of whatever. Great little singer-songwriter, like girl in her mid-30s, terrific songwriter, and sort of being labeled as alt country. But man, she's much deeper. She's not defined by a genre. She's just a great songwriter, and her songs turn out the way they lend themselves with no preconceived idea. So she came to me, and we did a record in February, and she came to LA, brought her band and everything, stayed at a bed and breakfast in the neighborhood, and we spent 12 days basically getting their DNA into the computer. And then 2 days after she left is when COVID hit. Oh. And everything stopped, right, in March. So all my guys, Kevin and Tony, my engineer, they were like, we're staying home. My wife and daughter were like, we're staying in the house. I was saying like, okay, everyone had to wear masks. We didn't know what to do. Everyone was scared. And so that knocked us down for about 3 months or 4 months. And then we slowly started coming back and work. And so we had nothing else to do. So we spent a lot of time fixing her record. It turned out exceptional. The record turned out really, really exceptional. And her band played on almost everything except I did some percussion, and I brought in an organ player and things like that. But the record's done, mastered. In the meantime, Bloodshot had a catastrophe at the label where there was some internal fighting between the owner of the label, the two owners, and the artists. one of the owners who'd been there forever, she got her husband got accused of sexual assault.
Ooh.
And she backed up her husband and said, that's not true, and and then everybody piled on her, and then they tried to buy her out. That didn't work. So they're in flux. So Sarah and her management and her team got released from Bloodshot. So they signed to 30 Tigers, and 30 Tigers is a kind of self-help label out of Nashville, and they're going to release some singles this year, and in January they're going to release the album. So that's their plan. But I'm really proud of the record. It came out great. There's an old adage or an old formula that was told to me many years ago, and it sort of makes sense. But it's like you start off in the business, and people go, "Who's Pete Anderson? Well, who's this guy, Pete Anderson? Who's Pete Anderson?" Nobody knows who you are. Then you have some success, and then they go, "Well, get Pete Anderson. I mean, if that's what you want, get Pete Anderson." And then Pete Anderson's pretty busy. So then the third step is, well, get somebody that sounds like Pete Anderson. Get somebody that does what Pete Anderson does. And then the fourth one, which is where I'm at now, is who's Pete Anderson? So I'm at the fourth part, which I'm not upset about because I'm glad I had the first three. But this girl's like 35 years old, and I'm sort of like, were you looking through your dad's records? I mean, how did you find me? Like, hey, Dad, I like this. Do you think this guy's still alive? And she goes, I listened to your records. I know who you are. I said, okay, God bless you. But it's, it's sort of that formula, because in reality, having a hit on the radio was like early 90s with Yoakam. And of course, he's a legacy artist, but there's awareness, and then there's real awareness, like popular awareness. I can still get people on the phone in the business, but there's just nothing left of the business. So I've really narrowed it down to just wanting to play my guitar, really.
Well, you can do that quite well.
Thank you. That's all I want to do.
I have some questions for you, man. I don't have anything written down, and
that's all right.
No form conversation kind of podcast, but we've met before. I wouldn't expect you to remember. By the way, James Schultz wanted me to tell you hello.
Oh, great.
I lived in Seattle forever, and for a while I worked there at the guitar store, and
awesome.
I was lucky enough to be present the first time you came through when he was in the small first version of the store.
Yeah.
And it was a real treat.
Thank you.
To be there, see you play, you and your boys, and to hear you tell stories. And when I started doing this podcast 3 years ago, I made a short list of people that I really wanted to have on the show, and you were right up there at the top. So
thank you.
I'm glad this is finally happening. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
How does a kid from Detroit become a funky ass telly picker? Like, how did that happen? Because you're funky as hell.
Thank you. It's not exclusive to Nashville. It's not exclusive to Texas. Buddy Emmons is from Indiana. Hank Snow's from Canada. So I don't know that, let's say the positive thing about Detroit was that there was a lot of white, blue collar auto workers that came from the South up there to go to work. So I was a first generation. I was born in Detroit, but my father was from the South. My mother was from the Southwest, and there's a strong music scene there. Obviously, there was a great blues scene that got discontinued because they built a freeway in the late 50s and tore up the blues, 2 blocks of the blues area. But it was somewhat of a small rival of Chicago that got torn up. Then, of course, there's Motown, and then there's a jazz scene. So there was a black element, a white element, a songwriter, singer-songwriter, folky element, and a blues element, a jazz element. So it was a really nice melting pot of places to dwell in musically. So my father was from the South. He passed away when I was 5, but the radio was always on. I remember the Grand Ole Opry being on. I remember, some of my friends' parents who were younger, who were like totally into, country music, and it was on the radio. And plus the fact I'm old enough that country music, if it was a hit, it was on hit radio. So you would hear Tiger by the Tail and then Satisfaction on the same station.
Yeah.
Right. So you get exposed to it, and you just think of it as, you don't think, that's country music, I don't listen to it. That came later, that kind of ghettoizing.
Right.
But prior to it was like, that's really cool. I mean, you might be singing, got a tiger by the tail, and then all of a sudden, can't get no. It just was popular.
Right.
Popular music. Elvis. I mean, Elvis had a whole country element to his stuff. So I sort of was nurtured by that. Definitely by the blues, but definitely by Elvis Presley. And you start, anybody that has any, I guess, quizzical nature to them is going to go backwards in the music. So you're going to look at Elvis and go, who was Arthur Big Boy Crudup? That's All Right Mama. You're going to look at Rolling Stones and go, well, who is, Bo Diddley? Who is Muddy Waters? And Albert King had a hit on the radio when I was a boy. I was like a teenager, and Born Under Bat Sign was a hit in the 60s. I remember hearing it as a hit here's a new one by Albert King, boom. And it was Albert King, so I was in a good place musically. And I saw, to make a long story longer, let's say, when you're a boy growing up in Detroit in the 50s, your parents, and I'm sure it happened to you, it happens to almost everybody, where they go, hey, you're 8 or 9 years old, and your parents' friends go, what do you want to be when you get big? Well, in 1956, 57, 58, there was 3 TV stations, maybe 3 radio stations, a couple of magazines, and the newspaper. It's like, I didn't have a lot of realize there was a lot of options. Both of my parents were auto workers. The last thing they wanted me to say was, I want to be an auto worker like my dad. It's like, no, you're not going to be, we want you to have something better in life. So I picked, initially I was like, well, you'd say, I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a fireman, a policeman, a soldier. They weren't even astronauts. There was like,
Right.
It was just like 4 things you could be, right? A teacher, maybe a teacher was even foreign, but I saw Elvis Presley when I was about 50, when I was about 8, 9, maybe 10 years old. And I was like, I want to be that guy. Yeah. What's that job? Right. And I liked the sound of the guitar, but I was too young to know that the guitar was coming from Scotty.
Right.
But Elvis was the image. Right. So I was like, I want to be that guy, but it was about playing guitar. And I finally, then I realized fairly soon after, I wasn't going to be Elvis Presley when I got in my teen years, but maybe I could be Elvis Presley's guitar player. Maybe I could be that guy. And then I started listening to guitar, and it sent me on a journey through folk music, folk blues, and not really so much country music when I was in my early teen years. It was really a lot of blues and folk blues. My mother left Detroit. My father passed away when I was young. My mother retired from Chrysler's. She moved to Phoenix, Arizona in the late 60s. So I started going, I was a teenager, late teens. I started going, I'd spend the summers in Detroit with my friends, and then I'd get what's called a drive-away car, where you drive a car for somebody to get it to another location. And I would go to Arizona with a friend, and I'd hang out there and I'd play music. And I went back and forth a couple times. And in the later years, in the late 68, so 67, 68, in Phoenix, I started seeing all the country music shows, and they were half-hour shows back to back. So Jimmy Dean had one. The precursor to Hee Haw was on there. Marty Robbins had one. There was quite a few. And, looking back, let's say, okay, now I love guitar. Guitar meets country music. Guitar is country music. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If you look at country music and you say 99.5% of those songs was written on a guitar.
Yeah.
It's guitar centric. Blues is guitar centric, but it could also be harmonica centric. It could also be, piano, saxophone. There's elements there. But country music is all guitar. So, and then peer groups like the Burrito Brothers, Jesse Ed Davis, Taj Mahal, those guys started dabbling in country music, and it made it look a little more attractive because they looked like me. They were like, oh, they're like kind of like cool, hippie, funky guys, but they're playing country music. So I just started on a trek in that era with Sweethearts of the Rodeo by the Byrds and the Burritos, and just listening to how the steel guitar played, how the guitar players played inside that music. And I kept wandering between that and the blues. So when I hit it with Dwight, I had lots of elements of blues. I could play all styles. And I had sort of formulated a little bit of my own style as a country picker because I had to imitate steel guitar because the bands were so small. We didn't have steel players all the time. So I had sort of like steel imitation licks.
Yeah.
And then I had like mandolin imitation licks. Then I got to use the volume pedal. And then I liked James Burton. I liked Albert Lee, but he was kind of like on another planet. It was like, I could never do that, but you appreciated that sound. So you take those sounds and started formulating them. And I had some gigs. I had a gig in Simi Valley, which is about 40 miles from my house actually in Ventura County. I had a gig where I played 11 nights on, 3 nights off, 4.5 sets. So I played.
Wow.
The gig was this: Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we played at a big honky tonk. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, we played at a beach club in Santa Monica. Then we'd start up Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So every other Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, we played at this club in Santa Monica called O'Mahony's. So I would have 11 on, 3 off, 11 on, 3 off. And the other saving grace was the drummer in that country band was a guy named Peter Gavin. Peter Gavin was from England. He came to America with Albert Lee in a band called Head, Hands, and Feet. Head, Hands, and Feet got hired to back Everly's. Then the two of them ended up basically in Stuff, early part, because they were backing up Joe Cocker before he had full Stuff. So this drummer could really play, and he played all the styles. So we would play country, and under the umbrella of country music is Chuck Berry, Little Richard, the Beatles. It's popular music, plus Hank Williams, Buck Owens, Merle Haggard. It goes on. And this guy that I worked with, Rick Tucker, had this huge book where like I'd play 3 or 4 nights and never repeat a song. It'd be like he knew so many songs. We had no set list. People would call out a name. They go, Conway Twitty. You go, okay. And he'd do 4 Conway Twitty songs. Then he'd go, Beatles. He'd do the Beatles.
Did you have charts?
Nothing. No. All I did was at the end of the night, I would write down every song I really didn't know the licks to. And it wasn't like it is now. There was no Napster, nowhere to search. I would listen on the radio on the way to work on the oldies station to try to hear, what are they doing on the Everly Brothers? What are they doing? What's Roy Orbison doing? How's this go? So I was learning songs in the car, driving to the gig and making notes. And I made notes for like 2 or 3 months. I brought a tape recorder. I recorded every night, listened. I was young. I was 30, 31. I was super hungry. And I just was hungry for knowledge, and I was hungry to play the guitar. And then in the meantime, I'm kind of like inventing these steel licks or trying to kind of copy them. And I'm not good at doing note for note. So it sort of was like I would emulate the feel and the sound, but I wasn't like playing exactly note for note. So they sort of become my thing.
Right.
It was like, well, this is my impression of it. Let's put it that way. And that's what I push on everybody if I do a seminar was don't try to play exactly like me. If you want to, if I met B.B. King as a kid, I wouldn't want to know exactly how he played a lick. I'd want to know what he was thinking about musically when he played the lick.
Right.
When he's looking at his guitar, what's he thinking?
Right.
That's it. And if I can get where he's thinking, maybe I could use that.
Let me ask you this: in all of your recorded music, and it is bountiful. Is there a solo that you feel like best captures all of that study that you did? I'm assuming that was in the 70s, 80s that you were doing that work out there. 80s, yeah.
Yeah, most of the recording started in the 80s.
But
you know, my first solo record is called Working Class. And on that record, I did a song called Our Day Will Come by Ruby and the Romantics. And there's kind of a funny story. I did an instrumental version, but it's Our Day Will Come and we'll have everything. It was a big hit. So when I made my first solo record, I sort of said, man, I'd like to have a song like Sleepwalk, but not Sleepwalk because everyone's done Sleepwalk.
Right.
Right. But I'd like some kind of romantic, melodic song that I could play as an instrumental that would fit in that category. So I stumbled across Our Day Will Come. And although it was a vocal version that was the hit, it was, which made it better because it wasn't known as an instrumental. I did it as an instrumental. Well, if you basically listen to that song, and I was young enough and kind of hungry enough and in that mode, it's almost like a menu of Pete Anderson licks of the day, you know, because I don't play that many preconceived licks. I kind of get into an area and flesh around what I want to kind of express, but they're not like and I try to fit it in. That's a death knell. You know, if you're a good bedroom guitar player, you're never going to get out of the bedroom. You've got to be able to go out, apply it, and if your lick doesn't fit, which you probably won't, you got to adapt immediately and make part of it fit. So, if you listen to Our Day Will Come off of Working Class, it's a menu. It's a menu because I had to pull out a lot of shit and I was hungry, and it was the first one I ever did where I was like, people are going to know me from, you know, Larry Carlton doing Sleepwalk. I mean, this is going to be Pete Anderson doing his version of Sleepwalk, but it's Our Day Will Come. So yeah, that one really, I think. I mean, I have other solos that you know I'm proud of. I'm proud of all of them, to be honest with you. I don't really have one that I go, I wish I could have it back.
Right. I remember you telling a story at the guitar store because someone was like, hey, will you show me how to play Guitarist Cadillacs? And you were like, maybe. And you and everyone was just sort of like, what? And you said, yeah, I don't like that last lick. I think is a mistake because it doesn't sound like anything I would ever play.
Right.
And
it's a complete mistake.
You improvise. You were improvising most all the time, or
yes. Yeah, I find that let's use our mind as an advanced computer, right? Almost artificial intelligence. So we program it, which means we listen to a lot of music, all kinds of music.
Sure.
Take it in. Hopefully we're not too stoned or too drunk, so we retain it, right? Take it in sober, and then trust that your mind has power. And then as you hear other music and it inspires you, something will come the artificial intelligence in your brain will pop something out to you. And it could be a title, it could be a lick, it could be a person, right? It could say BB King. It could say Bucks Polka. I mean, I've had those things happen to me where words would come into my head as I'm listening to music. So music is in the air. It's there. And it's like the cloud. You just go, oh, I'm gonna grab this, oh, I'm gonna grab that. So when I'm in the studio and I listen and somebody says, here's a space I want you to play a solo in, is like a canvas for me to paint on, right? It's artistic. It's like, okay, so what do? I listen. If I'm doodling with my instrument, if I hire a soloist and I say, I want you to play a solo and he's doodling, yeah, man, play it for me. I'm going to be there all day because he's not listening.
Right.
And he's going to give me preconceived licks that he made up and try to fit them in. That's the death knell. That's where it sounds stiff. It doesn't sound right. But you get the guy to go play it for me and they sit there and listen to it. Because what I'm doing is like, I'm letting music come to me and it'll come to me, a thought, a phrase, something will come into my head and then I'll start to explore it. And that's kind of how I do it.
I don't know if it is that we see so much more because, you know, you pick up your phone and there's a barrage of everything, right? You go onto social media and at least on my feed, I just see like, incredible guitarist after incredible guitarist. On the surface, when you're like, oh wow, that's a hot lick. How about that? There's something about hot lick players today that I hesitate to use the word scrappy to describe your playing because that sort of implies that it's not refined and it's very sophisticated, but it feels more guttural, or it feels like you're attacking the guitar, and there's something very rehearsed about a lot of young players, and I wonder if you have an opinion, if you think that has to do with the way that we're technologically connected and the way information can come to you now. Like, do you think that as people are learning and developing styles, it's affected by only hearing and working something out blindly, versus going on YouTube and learning the encyclopedia of everything?
Well, I think that it's much easier to learn now because of all the tools we have. We can slow things down in the computer. We can keep the same key. We can see it. We can get tablature. We can get chords. There's an unbelievable amount of ways to learn it, which is good, which is credible. And I'm not an anti-futuristic type of person. The problem is also kind of the way we're taught, and the way music is being taught. Back in the day, way back, 50s and 60s, it was taught on the bandstand.
Right.
Look at the Charlie Parker movie. He would be like, hey, he'd go to the piano player on the break and go, what did you play there? And the piano player would go, well, I'm doing this. And then I got a flat 5 substitution, and then I played this over it. And he's like, play it with you. And he'd listen to his right hand and go, ba-ba-da. So they would hand music down kind of like American Indians that tell the story and keep the encyclopedia going. It was word of mouth. And somewhere within word of mouth, some things don't always line up, but it's a good thing because then you start to create.
Right.
So I'm not copying. I'm listening, learning, and then using it to create my own, what I want to do. So that's where I was at. That's how I got to where it is. And I feel that playing fast or not fast, or clean or not clean, or whatever, I think these are all techniques that we use. If we're aware that they're techniques, then we can use them to color the solo. So the solo is not simply a technical exercise. It's a musical statement. And the biggest example I can give, and it's hard, it'll be hard for some people listening that don't play that type of music, but you can learn from it. The biggest example is Wes Montgomery. So Wes would play a solo that everybody could understand. He didn't play over your head, but it was badass and it was creative and he created it. So Joe Pass could play over your head. He was playing stuff, it's like Oscar Peterson, it's like, yikes, man, I appreciate it, but it's too much for me. I can't, it's over my head musically. Wes had a way of playing and not playing over your head. So he did, the technique was a wow factor in that he used his thumb, but other than that, he wasn't playing so fast that you didn't understand it. He wasn't playing things that you couldn't probably sit down and like kind of work out and get a little bit of a grip on. So he had a unique ability to play complex music, in his case, jazz, and play to the common man. And so I think you always have to remember that your right hand technique, your picking technique, and how your left hand is, how it plays, how it plays the strings they're just colors on the palette. If you take any one of those things and make it the rule, then it's completely boring. It's completely like, okay, yeah, that was a great trick. I heard it. I listened to one song. I listened to maybe 3 songs. I can't hear, I'm done. I can't hear that anymore. It's not talking to me. And I think it's just human nature. Now, the guys that stay with it, are little guitar nerds and guys that are like super, guitar junkie guys that are just like, yeah, and they're in that bag. But if I want to talk to everybody musically, I need to escape that.
Right. I heard it a lot in the studio.
Yeah.
Stupid.
Yeah, if you worked at a guitar store, you heard it every hour, every day. Yeah, relentless. You have to break away and be brave and go. I don't have to do that to wow people.
Right.
Choice of notes, melodic content can wow people.
There are a lot of things that I am automatically impressed by that even remedial guitar players, if they can do it, I'm very impressed. That's steel licks on a standard 6-string and very good Travis picking. For whatever reason, I am fucking dazzled by Travis picking.
Super talent. Yep.
'Cause I'm terrible at it. Terrible at it. I can't make my way through Mystery Train. Can't do it.
Well, I had a hard time going from, finger picks, then thumb pick, then flat pick, then now full circle to no pick again, because I started with no pick and now I don't use a pick.
No,
but
all I see you got the nails.
Yeah, and I need to get them trimmed. But that said, when I started, it was like this, right? It was the coolest. If you're going to be a working musician and not play your own music per se, and you're going to work backup for somebody, then having a pick in your fingers, which is called hybrid picking. So you got the flat pick and the fingers. That's the most effective way to play. I eventually was palming the pick so much that I just said I put it down. Felt awkward because I didn't have a pick in my palm, but I was never using the pick anymore. So once I put it down, these 2 fingers, this finger becomes free. This finger becomes what these 2 fingers were. So instead of do, I've got do, but I've got do. So I ended up with an extra finger to pluck with.
Since
So now I can play
we're making farm animal sounds,
yeah, I can,
how, how would you articulate the funky stuttering sounds like the like that?
that's all. Yeah, chicken picking basically, but you can stutter with it and mute with it, and you can use your palm, lift your palm, and also use your fingers to mute the string. It's like like yakety sax or something,
Right.
it's all that
You
stuff.
do that both ways, either hybrid
Yes,
or just with the.
but it's easier without the pick. It's way easier.
I keep hearing that everything is.
I mean, you're taking a big step to play without the pick, but if it's the type of music, if you're not, I mean, you're cornered because you can't go, but I can do backward rakes with my thumb or my finger. I can play down, I can do fanning, any number of things that I can. And I've learned to do, like instead of badoop, 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 I can do with my finger or my thumb. You can throw your thumb into it and it's really fat and sloppy, like ba-doop, 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 ba-doop. So there's a lot of many more pluses, I think, without the pick for me. But I just play
Never lose
Pete
a pick.
Anderson. Huh?
Never lose a pick.
Right, exactly. But I just play Pete Anderson music now. So I'm at a stage in my life where it's like, I just play what I want to play the way I want to play it. And I don't really work for anybody. You can hire me occasionally to do something, but that said, you're hiring what I'm doing right now. It's not like, hey, play like you did 20 years ago and use a pick and do this. It's like, I don't really do that anymore. I don't want to.
Hey, go get some other guy.
Exactly. Get somebody that sounds like Pete Anderson.
Pete Anderson.
Yeah. Who's Pete Anderson? That's who I used to be.
So, how did you get into producing?
Wow.
Because that was it's a steep mountain to climb, and you crested. I mean, you worked with some of the most notable legends of the 20th century.
You know, learning to play guitar was difficult for me. So if I was in 6th grade or 7th grade and I had to go to a really good counselor and take some sort of aptitude tests and all that shit, the last thing they would have said is like, you need to be a guitar player. There'd be like, there's nothing on this graph that we did that says, hey, look at that. You've got exceptional ear. You've got exceptional this. You should be a guitar player. No, but it would have said you have leadership skills. And I had leadership skills. And I was embarrassed to have leadership skills because when you're 6th, 7th, 8th grade, you're pulled out of the line to say, okay, everybody, this is Pete. He's going to lead us on the playground today. Do what he says. And you're kind of like, they're all going to hate me.
Right.
Well, once I got over that fact that I don't care what you think about me, and I realized I'd be in a group of people and there would be a problem or something that needed to be solved or some small thing to be arranged, I would come up with a solution. Now, because I'm just one of many, my solution isn't going to be any more important than yours. And you're going to have people that are going to be insecure, immature, whatever. It's part of life. And they're going to say, why should I listen to you? And it's like, well, I think this is the right answer. So that started to happen when I started putting bands together. And I wasn't the leader and the singer of the band, but 9 times out of 10, when we're sitting in the room trying to figure something out, I would come up with an idea and say, hey, what if we did this? What if we tried that? So I was always pushing like arrangement ideas, and I would listen to records and listen to how they arranged them. So the records became my how-to books. And eventually when I got to Los Angeles, I started doing it. I went into the studio with a friend in a little funky studio and wanted to record my own stuff. So I sort of figured out how to sit in the artist chair and be the producer, not knowing that what I was doing was producing, and it was producing, arranging, and then after following through that and just becoming a guitar player for hire, I would be in demo situations when we got in our 20s where we're in Los Angeles, somebody's trying to get a record deal. He's going to go get $300 and go to a studio and cut some tracks. And he's going to give me $20 a song. And he's going to invite the best players he knows, but we're all kids. None of us are great. I would, 9 times out of 10, I would have the answers to arrangement problems, which put me in a different chair. And until people acquiesced and actually hired me for that skill, I was just one of 5 guys with an idea, and it'd just be like, yeah, so what? So I'd suffer with problematic musical arrangements. So it's really how it happened. I mean, in the case of Dwight, I started playing, we were a 4-piece, electric guitar, acoustic guitar, bass, and drums. So I got control of the intro licks, the signature licks, all that kind of stuff. And then, make suggestions on new songs on how the drums should be, the arrangement of the drums, the intro, and then how many verses, and then the solo. And I didn't make those up. I would listen to other records and say, how did they do it? How did, listen to Highways and Heartaches by Ricky Skaggs. That's like a book of like country arrangements. How did they do it? Who played what, where? Because it's not everybody just playing, It's organized, it's arranged. And I really kind of did a study of that because I wasn't the lead guy writing the songs and singing. So my thoughts were elsewhere.
Right. And so really your study for this, your preparation and your sort of like your education and preparation started when you were 4, 5, listening to the Opry on the radio.
I guess it was, seeping into my consciousness then. I remember thinking, I remember when I would be like 14 or 15 and hearing a song on the radio and going, that's going to be a hit. That's a hit song. I would hear it. Now, what I was hearing was a pretty strong musical hook refrain that was repeated over and over again, but somehow I recognized that. Whereas if I would be a group of 5 of my buddies and we were into sports and we were into chasing girls and we were into, being dumbbells but not of the 5, there wasn't like 3 others that went, yeah, Pete, that'll be a hit. They didn't think that way.
Right.
My brain went, that sounds like a hit song. I wasn't really playing a musical instrument then. I don't know why, but I recognized it, the repetitive manner of it, as that's how it becomes a hit. And so I would follow that that was in my DNA as I was listening to music and separating things, like popular music, blues music, country music, jazz, things of that nature would get compartmentalized in my brain as far as like program listening. What does it do? How does it do it? What's the form?
Outside of Elvis outside of Elvis, do you remember sort of like a lightning rod moment for guitar playing for you? And do you remember what the first song you learned when you played it, it sounded like the song? Because I learned plenty of songs that didn't sound anything like the song.
Well, I remember distinctly hearing Muddy Waters the first time on the radio when I was 16, and it wasn't oldies. He was alive, healthy, and had made a record, and it was on the black station, the black R&B soul station in Detroit. And I heard Muddy Waters and just like turned my ear like, what the fuck is that? And it just grabbed me like, wow, it was so electric. And then not long after that, I kind of got into B.B. King.
Was it electric? Was it that?
Oh no, it was way before that.
Right.
It was real muddy.
Yeah.
It was like, it was like, I'm a man, it was like, because the British invasion was happening and I think they were drawing parallels to it, but it was current. Like I said, I heard Albert King, current, here's a new record by Albert King. It was like, okay, who's Albert King? I kind of know who he is. Born Under a Band Sign. I'm like, wow. I was 18. Was on the radio. Current.
Right.
So that was a good time, you know. But then B.B. King really was the one that spun me out, you know, as I got a little bit older. I was like, everything about B.B. King was just it. And I don't remember the first time I ever heard B.B. King. I don't remember the first time. I remember chasing down one of his records. I remember seeing him at the psychedelic ballroom, like the Fillmore kind of ballroom, or they had one in Detroit where I went to see him play. And a lot of blues guys came through there. But I also saw, I guess the first really gotcha moment, like what you're talking about, there was a coffee house in Detroit called the Chessmate, and you didn't have to be 21 to get in. So I saw Joni Mitchell there. I saw Tom Rush there. I saw Patrick Skye. I saw Dave Von Ronk. I saw Spider John Kerner. I saw a lot of these folk singer-songwriter guys, Jim Kweskin Jug Band. And one time I was going there, I was 17 years old, senior in high school. My friend and I wanted to go to the Chessmate. He was a little older than me. We called him up and said, who's playing tonight? And the guy's name was Maury that ran the club. He ran the place. He was the owner. He goes, the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. And I go, I had no idea. Now check this out. I had no clue. So I go, what's a blues band? I'd never heard of a blues band. I was into blues, but I was into folk blues. Right. You know, like I like Dylan. I listened to Dylan, but I was like into like Dave Von Ronk playing, you know, folk blues. I'm like, blues band? I know what a jug band is, but what's a blues band? I said, what's a blues band? And he goes, oh, he said, you know, I said, is it electric? He goes, yeah, they're an electric band, which to me at that point was like, oh, that's going to be fucked. I'm not going to, I thought it was like the Blues Magoos. I was like, oh, this is going to be horrible. It's going to be like Blue Cheer. And then I said, but the lead guy, Paul, plays the harmonica. And I was like, well, I'm trying to play harmonica as a kid, right? In Iraq, like Dylan, right? So I'm like, he plays harmonica? And good enough to say that he plays harmonica, right? Not as an afterthought. So I thought, this is intriguing, but I don't know I'm going to like this. So I called my friend and I said, let's go to the Chessmate. He said, okay. He said, who's playing? I said, a guy named Paul Butterfield. And I don't know anything about it, but he plays harmonica. So we go down to the Chessmate, and it's 1966.
Wow.
And it's Butterfield, Bloomfield, Elvin Bishop, Mark Naftalin. Sam Lay was not on drums. He'd already quit. A guy named Billy Davenport, and I think Jerome Arnold on the bass. And it was the original band without Sam Lay. And I walk in, and their stuff is set up, and I see drums and electric stuff, and I'm like, this, I don't know about this, right? And now I'm 17. Butterfield's like 22. They're young guys, 23 years old, right? So we're sitting in this coffee house. Now I'm sitting at a table, because it was tables and chairs. The whole room was full up. Maybe the whole room completely packed held 50 people, 55 people. So I'm sitting in the room. I can't remember what night it was. It wasn't like a Friday night, but anyway, there's maybe 20 people there, 25 people. And the band comes out without Paul Butterfield and starts playing. And they're loud, right? Because I'm used to listening to Joni Mitchell with a folk guitar. They're loud. And so we're sitting there and they're playing, and it's like, all right. And I remember the guitar player's like, man, he really playing, because I played guitar too. And he's moving his hands every time he go, and he'd move his hands really fast up and down the neck. And I was like, wow, I never seen anything like that. But then Mike Bloomfield they were vamping, and he's playing. And there was a little room off to the side of the stage where was the green room, right? And Butterfield was in this room, and he was drinking a bottle of wine. And Bloomfield like looking over like, hey man, like doing this, like, come on. I didn't know who anybody was, right? And I'm looking like, what's going on? And they just kept playing this one song, vamping over and over again. And Butterfield wasn't ready to come out and whatever the deal was. And Bloomfield's getting mad. He's going, hey, like this. Finally, Butterfield walks out. And the whole band is on a stage. And the stage is about, if you stood next to it, it wouldn't even come up to your waist. It was like 3 feet, maybe 2.5 feet high. He comes out, stands on the floor in front of the stage. He's got a mic, stands on the floor. The band's on the bandstand behind him. He comes out. He's got a corduroy sport coat on, a vest, a black shirt, sunglasses, hair greased back. Comes out, doesn't say shit. Walks up to the microphone and starts going, I'm like, what the fuck? And I'm like singing, and he's play a solo. He looks at Bloomfield like this. And so then he like lifts up his side, turns around to his back of the audience, kind of lifts his sunglasses and grabs a harp. He was looking for the right key, gets the key. He turns around and he goes, and my world exploded. It was like, I've never fucking close to hearing anything like an amplified harmonica. And I was like, fucking, hey, this is amazing. And then I was like staring at the guy and staring at the harmonica going, what is he playing? And then I figured it out. It was a harmonica, right? So I was like, okay, that's the harmonica, right. But then I said, that can't be like the harmonicas I have. That's got to be that's an electric harmonica. That's a special harmonica. I kept staring. And finally I figured out he was playing Marine bands, the same Marine band harmonica that I played and Dylan played and everybody else. I had never heard anything like that. Freaked me the fuck out completely. Went home, bought the record the next day, got the record, called up 3 or 4 of my buddies that weren't there with me, said, you have to come to my house right now. And they went, what? I said, you have to come. I got to play this for you. They came to my house. I had a little room in the back. I put on the back of the record, it said, this record should be played loud. It said on the record. And Paul Butterfield plays Hohner harmonicas. I put the record on this little funky record player, turned it on, and we sat in the room, and all of us were just like, we're just hypnotized, just like, oh my God. I mean, it just blew me completely away. And I read the back of that record so many times, and Little Walter, Sonny Boy Williamson, Elmore James. I got all the names and started looking for the records. I was 17 then.
I love that the lightning bolt moment.
That was it.
Didn't even involve guitar. Like that wasn't even the focus.
Nope. Power.
Right. Incredible.
It was. Yeah.
Do you think that any bit of, because you had an experience where you couldn't even really process what he was playing. It didn't make sense that he was playing a harmonica, right?
Right.
Do you think that any of that sort of energy transferred into the way you interpreted guitar? You know, like we learn vocabulary, we learn language, and then we re-express it our own way. And
I think presentation. I mean, the way he postured himself, and like, I think he was young, so I don't know. He's 22 years old. He had a whole different environment growing. He was a white kid from a white neighborhood, but he grew up in Chicago and got to hang out with the blues guys. And I'm not sure that he knew how much power it had, but it was powerful. And so if I'm witnessing it, I'm seeing attitude and presentation from Butterfield, really. So it doesn't matter what instrument. He could have been playing saxophone. He could have been playing, clarinet. He was just putting it in your face. He was badass.
Right.
So maybe that.
Right.
Yeah. Because he walked out like he knew what he was doing. It's like, oh, okay, who's this guy? Oh, he looks like he belongs. Oh, he knows what he's. And when he played, you're like, oh, this is the shit. You thought the band was good? This guy is killing it.
Wow.
Yeah.
When you got out to LA, you already had a lot of gig experience.
I had gig. I'm sort of, not a lot. In Detroit, we weren't even 21 yet. We stumbled around. I had kind of a jug band, a wash tub player, and I played harmonica through a rack and really learning how to play folky music, and then playing some blues. And then when I started playing blues right before I left, like electric blues in Detroit. And then when I got to Phoenix, I started playing more, and I got a gig at a bar. I got an after hours gig in Phoenix, which is hard to imagine because it was such a early sleepy town. But I got an after hours gig at a bar that played Creedence, whatever. But I was always at home trying to play blues. And I put a band together called the McKinley Street Rangers, and we had horns in the band, and we were playing Butterfield and playing blues and playing like Eddie Harris, some jazzy stuff, no country stuff. And we did that for 2 years. So I got to LA in 72, and I started going to Phoenix in 69, 70, 71. So most of the Phoenix era was playing in like trying to be like Paul Butterfield. I mean, Butterfield horn band. We had horns in the band, right. And we played gigs then, but they were, it wasn't like hardcore blues bar gigs. They were like, we played at the military base, or we play at this little dance club, or here or there. And then when I got to LA, I came over with a bass player, and we decided we'd outgrown Phoenix and we were going to go to Los Angeles. And we slept in his van. We had nowhere to stay. We slept in his van for 2 weeks. We would park at some different place every night, and every morning the cops would wake us up. Can't sleep here, can't sleep here. We were in his Volkswagen van. Sleep on the street, in a parking lot, try to hide. It did not matter. They found us. Right. And I started to put a band together is what my goal was to, because I was playing a lot of harmonica. So I was playing harp and guitar, and I was going to be like a Paul Butterfield. I was going to be a blues guy and try to make a blues record with my buddy on bass. So we started auditioning guys, and we found a guy that had a little recording studio that needed guinea pigs. So we went there and recorded with him while he was learning how to record, and we bashed through that. And then after that fell apart, I was just like at a crossroads of like, I want to play music to make a living. And I was doing just factory job, whatever I could do to make a living, right? And I really wanted to make a living playing an instrument. And I made a conscious decision, because I was a pretty good harp player, but I made a conscious decision to concentrate on guitar, because even if I got really good on harp, it was very limiting. There was just so much you were going to be able to do as a harmonica player. But guitar was completely wide open. There was so many places that you could possibly work. So I decided to concentrate on guitar and not concentrate so much on the harmonica. Tried to take some lessons because I was completely illiterate. Took a couple lessons that were just not effective. The teachers were poor.
What did you learn in those lessons?
Not much. Some guy was like, here's an alternating picking technique, like doop, 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 doop. But none of them they didn't have a structure to teach you the fundamentals of music so that then you could take them and apply them. Right. Well, I stumbled around from 23 to 27, and I was doing blues gigs. I had a blues band. I would play a little biker bar or a shit bar here, nothing special. And then I saw an ad for a seminar at Guitar Center many years ago. And it was a Howard Roberts, the guitar player. Yeah. It was Howard Roberts seminar, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And it was basically exclusive to guitar. Like, Howard Roberts is going to teach you everything he knows about guitar in 3 days, basically. So it was kind of like a traveling tent show, like religious tent show. And so I signed up for it. I said, I'm going to do this. I got to learn. I need to learn. And I had a job at a music store. And it was a really cool music store because it was a little house. The guy that ran it was a sax player that sold vintage saxophone to like the heavy jazz guys in LA. So some heavy cats would come through this store because he had vintage instruments. It wasn't your normal music store. It was really a house turned into a music store. So I got a job there, and I would just sweep up and clean and might sell a pack of strings. But I was around music, and I was like, guys would come in and pick up the guitar and like play, and I'd be like, fuck, how do they do that? Like the guy that ran the place would have a saxophone, and he'd hear like an older guy playing some jazz chords. He'd go grab his saxophone, he'd come out and he'd go, hey, I like your little tune you're playing there. Let's jam. And these guys would go, what? Let's jam. And he'd go, all right, what do you want to play? He goes, T for two? He goes, yeah, T for two. So he'd start T for two, and the guy'd start playing. And I was just like, how do you know all this shit? How does this guy know? It wouldn't matter. He fucking could this, and there was 3 or 4 guitar players that came in. They just hear it and play it, right? So I was like, man, I got to learn this. I want to make a living as a guitar player. And so I went to the Howard Roberts seminar, which was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, completely and utter. It blew my mind like Paul Butterfield. It blew my mind. Like, it's like, say you wanted to be a carpenter and you got to have 3 days with a master carpenter who took out every tool that you were going to need. And he said, see this tool here, you're never going to need it. Throw it away. Here's the 3 tools you need to do this. So he'd show you every tool and how to use it. Now, you weren't going to be adept at using those tools, but you were going to know what they were and how to use them, which is the first step. And you were going to have a pamphlet or a booklet that showed you what they were and how to use them. And which ones were like, even though the guy at the hardware store said, oh, you need one of these. This guy who's a carpenter said, fuck that shit. You don't throw that one in the trash. Don't ever buy that one. That's what Howard Roberts did. And he was amazing. As much as he was a kooky cat, he was a great musician. He was a great reader. He played stuff in the Wrecking Crew. He was part of that. Yeah. He could play on a Sonny and Cher record, and then at night go down and read chamber music with an orchestra. He was the cat. He was a heavy cat. Above all that, he was a genius educator. What he created in what became GIT was genius. Wasn't just revolutionary. It was genius. It was like, wow, nobody ever thought of it like this. So I went to the seminar, and I remember coming back from the seminar on Monday to the little guitar store. And everybody that worked at the guitar store was a musician that was like in town for a while or was down on his luck or trying to, make a buck. So this bass player, friend of mine named Bob Gross, really good bass player. So he comes up and he goes, hey, so I see you went to the Howard Roberts seminar over the weekend, huh? And he wasn't making fun of me, but he was just kind of like poking a stick, like he goes, so what'd you learn? And I remember telling him, it was like when, you might be too young for this, it might not have happened, but it was like when one of your friends got trapped with the born again Christians and got baptized over the weekend and then said, sorry, I can't hang out with you anymore. And I'm going to pour all my drugs down the toilet.
Right.
And because you're not a born again, I can't see you anymore. It was one of those moments where I looked at Bob and I go, I know everything there is to know about music. And he goes, bullshit. And I go, ask me. Go ahead, ask me. And I had all the pamphlets. I had 5 pamphlets with about 6 sheets in each one stapled together. That was the book. And I went, go ahead, ask me. I'll tell you everything. Diminished, augmented, the 4 chords, the 4 this, major scale harmonized, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Phrygian. I mean, ask me. I dare you to fucking ask me. Can I play them? Hell no. But I know them. So that was huge. I tried to study it on my own for about a year. And then about a year later, what is now Musicians Institute
Right.
was guitar. It was GIT. GIT opened with Howard Roberts. He was there, and it opened, and I was like, 6 months went by. Every 6 months they would start a new class, and 6 months went by, and I was like, I gotta go, man. That's it. I'm playing country bars and shit gigs. Music's a mystery to me. I'm illiterate. I don't know, if the song goes, 1-6-2-5, I don't know 1-6-2-5. I know F sharp minor 7, D minor. I had to memorize the chords. They didn't make sense to me. So I had enough. I think I borrowed money from my mom. I think it was $2,500 or something, which was a fortune back then. But I went and auditioned. I played a B flat major scale on an acoustic guitar, and he goes, well, let's see about the financing. I pulled the check out of my pocket. He goes, well, you're in. It was like one of those shyster schools, where the guy goes, well, let's talk. Okay, so are you ready to take your test now? And it was like, yeah. He goes, play a B flat major scale. And I played the weirdest B flat major scale you ever heard of in your life, because a major 7 sounded wrong to me. If I played a scale for you back then, it had a dominant 7 in it. I was that blues centric. So it was like, I know this note's going to sound bad, but I know this is the right note. It was like, da, 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 da. And so he was like, okay. I remember he looked at me and he goes, that's an interesting way to play that scale. Because I fucked it up so bad because I was guessing. And he goes, well, let's talk about the tuition. And I pulled the check out of my pocket. And, well, I guess you're in the school. Welcome to the school.
So you went to GIT.
Yes.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was incredible.
And has the curriculum always? It's like
it's changed.
Yeah,
it changed about I don't know. It's 8 years, 6, 7 years after I was there.
Right.
The years that I were there, I come to realize are the most special years of guitar instruction ever because of the curriculum.
What year was this?
78, 79 or 70. Yeah, 78, 79. I think the school started in probably started in 78. I think I was in the second class.
Wow.
And Stan Lynch from Autograph was in that class.
He was in your class.
Yeah, the girl that played with Jeff Beck and Michael Jackson.
Batten?
Jennifer. Yeah, Jennifer. I'm going to do some podcasts with her coming up. Jennifer was in my class. Kevin Dukes, who played guitar with Jackson Brown and Don Henley, was in my class.
Wow.
A lot of cats went on to do shit.
Yeah.
It was a special curriculum, man, and a special class.
I fantasized when I first started playing guitar about going down there and doing that. I didn't have the confidence as a young person. But so, how old are you at this point? And in the scope of things, where are your chops when you go?
Well, when I went to GIT?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was about 28, and most of the kids were 21. 21. So most of them are 7 years younger than me. As far as playing blues, I was really good. I could sit down and grab a dobro and tune it open and play like Robert Johnson. I could play, Bobby Bland. I could play Muddy Waters. I could play B.B. King. I was an accomplished blues, but I was illiterate. But I was an accomplished blues musician on both guitar and harmonica. As far as playing anything else, I did it by memory. So I had gotten turned on to James Burton. So he was my touchstone and my back door into country music. Although I listened to Jesse Ed Davis and other guys, Burton was the closest because Burton was a bluesy country player and he would do chicken picking. And I knew chicken picking, but I knew it from Howlin' Wolf.
Right.
like Howlin' Wolf chicken picking. So I could chicken pick. So Burton was my gateway drug into country. And he did certain specific things when he was asked to do solos. They always had a little bit of a dominant edge to them. And I expanded out from there, actually, as I started, after I left school, got out of school, and I started playing country bars, I started imitating steel guitar. That changed everything, right, melodically. And so I could do James Burton plus play like, Buddy Emmons, like play steel licks and James Burton licks. And that's a pretty powerful combo. That covers a lot of space. And then you take into fact that I had studied jazz harmony and theory. So when we did Western swing, I could play a little bit of the jazzy stuff, 6th and 9 chords. Right. So that was a pretty strong combination that was probably planted in my garden, that started it. And, where I am today is different than where I was then, but the essence of it is still remains.
What an interesting thing to learn. I don't think that I knew that you went to GIT, and it's admirable that you, as you stated yourself, an accomplished blues player, you went to school, man, at 28.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, a lot of people in other fields and other, lines of work, going back to school at 28 or 30 or even
right,
35 or 40, not that big of a deal. But in music, we have this idea that there's we have a shelf life, right?
Right.
And I commend you for.
I just kept getting better. So
yeah, no, I know it.
I was like, this is work. It's like I'm eating chocolate cake every day and I'm getting stronger. I'm just going to keep going, because it was important for me to learn the language of music, because I could play, but I was illiterate, so I couldn't explain it. So I needed to be literate. I didn't need to be a great reader, but I needed to understand music, and I had a hunger to understand it. And as I understood it, it expanded my playing. And then when I was in a situation where I was the producer or facto producer, or in a group of musicians, and I needed to make a point, I could talk to you musically. And if you tried to bully me, I could embarrass you.
Right.
Right. I knew where the and one was. I knew how to put in a bar of two. I knew all the tricks. It was like, if you can't do it, that's not my fault. But, this is what works. And then people would go, well, listen to Pete. Well, Pete knows what to do. Well, Pete, what's that? Listen to the record. What's that chord he's playing? And I never had a great ear, don't get me wrong, but because I knew music, I could figure out, he's doing a 3 minor chord. Oh, but he's got this in the bass. And they're like, oh, cool. And it would work. So once you do it and it works, they start to go back to you and say, help me, help me, help me. That's what it gave me. It gave me the language.
And so really the greatest sort of explosion of knowledge for you came at 28.
The beginning of it, yes. Yeah, because and you know what? I've had a couple of little mini explosions even much later in life from my studying, because I'll give you a quick example. When we went there, like Howard Roberts used to say, because he would sneak into class and go, hey, let's do a class with me. And he would do stuff, right? And so he would say, you can play anything you want against a 5 chord. Now it's susceptible to music. Let's it's like Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain when I hit the 5 chord. If I do some flat 5 substitution, if we're not playing jazzy, it's going to sound kind of bizarre. But that said, I can do anything I want against a 5 chord. And I'm like, what? The fuck? What are you fucking? What do you mean? Do anything you want against a? I never understood it. Well, many years later, so 28, I'm 72. Let's talk about 48, 50, 51, 52. I start playing. I stopped playing. When I stopped playing with Dwight was triads. His music was triads. I'm not talking down about it. I'm just saying the nature of that music is triads, country music. And I started playing Western swingy stuff, and I had an artist on my label, and we went from triads to tetrachords, which are 4-note chords. So I had 13s, 9s, 6s, diminished, augmented. I had that extra note that comes into the chord, which means if I play an augmented chord, I can arpeggiate something augmented that won't throw you off because I've already played the chord. So consequently, that world opened up, which is a world that I'd already planted but never reaped the harvest of at GIT, because now I realized I can play whatever I want against a 5 chord, because the 5 chord's really, if I flat 5 sub the 5 chord, now I can arpeggiate a flat 5 sub. So if I look at the key of G and the 5 chord's a D7, I can play an A flat 13 and it'll sound like an augmented, it'll sound like a harmonic 5 chord. So even if you're still playing, if we're in the band together and you play a D7, I can arpeggiate an A flat 13 right over your D7, and it's going to sound pretty fucking slick. You're going to go, that's pretty fucking cool. What'd you do? Well, I played whatever I wanted, but I can play whatever I want over a 5 chord. Now it's like bing, like that many years later, did that little gem come back to me.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Do you have any favorite producing moments? You told some pretty gold mine stories at the guitar store, and you have a long list of folks that are really, dream artists.
Yeah. I think once in putting away something and saying that's a good story to tell later on, when you're doing a seminar and people always want the candy, right? They want the stories. I did a vocal session with Willie Nelson for a Dwight Yoakam record. Right. And there's a whole story around it, but basically I flew up to San Francisco because Willie was doing like 3 nights in a row at the Fillmore, and we were doing a record. I did it without Dwight. I did it by myself. I just went up and I got Willie, and he'd agreed to sing on this one song. Anyway, and it was a bit of a funny kind of thing, because Willie's a sweetheart of a man, and he's Willie Nelson, and he is Willie, whatever you want to say, he's that guy. He deserves that mantelpiece. But I knew Mickey Raphael, his harp player, was the only guy I knew. So he shows up at the studio on his way to the Fillmore for a sound check to do this session. And I've worked with Buck Owens. I worked with Harold Land Sr. I worked with Roger Miller. I've worked with some older guys, and their recording idea of recording is stuck in the 60s, where it's like, I do one take, that's good, right? We're out of here, I'm in tune. And it's like, well, no, you're not even close. But that said, you kind of have to cajole them to get them to come in and work hard with modern recording techniques, because it exposes you. So Willie was like, well, I'm just going to sing and leave and this will be fine. And it was a little bit awkward at first because he wouldn't sing into the microphone, and he was holding a piece of paper, and you don't admonish him, and he's Willie, and this was like maybe 15, 20 years ago. So I'm in the studio. I'm at Different Fur in San Francisco. I don't have my own engineer, so I got an engineer myself. We're on Pro Tools. Against the wall, right over here to my right, is my buddy Mickey Raphael. He's the only guy I know. The other guy is the road manager, and the other guy is Willie's manager. And they're looking at me like, all right, hotshot. All right, motherfucker. Oh, you think you're going to produce Willie Nelson? Oh, let's see what you got. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah. So, and I get the vibe. I know that. I know the studio routine better than anybody. So Willie goes out and he sings 3 or 4 times, and I don't have it. I'm not even close. And I said, and he keeps looking at me like, that's good, right? And I'm like, I wanted to say, no, it's fucking horrible, but he's Willie, right? So I can't say that. And I'm not going to say it in front of his manager. So I go, Willie, could you do it one more time? And he kind of did like a double take, kind of in a good, not in a bad way. Don't get me wrong, but he kind of went, one more time? And I went, yeah, could you do it one more time? Because he kept turning his head to read the paper. Anyway, so he did it one more time. And it was one verse is all I needed. And so he said, can I listen? I said, yeah, sure, absolutely. Come listen. So he had to go around the corner and come up the side. I lean over to the guy, the engineer, who's not my engineer, but he's the house engineer. And I said, use the last take and put a lot of reverb on it. And don't turn it up too loud. He goes, okay. So boom, boom, he gets ready. Willie comes, he sits down in the chair where the engineer is. And I'm standing behind him. So like if I'm Willie, I'm right here. I'm standing here. And I go, yeah, check it out. So he hits the tape, rolls the tape. Willie sits there. The manager's here. Mickey Raphael's here. The road manager's here. And the manager and the road manager are like going, well, Willie's God. So whatever Willie says is, that's it, right? You're fucked. So if Willie says he's done, he's done. So I'm standing there. And so Willie hears it go by and he let it roll. And I had done a guitar solo. It was a medium ballady, medium song called what was it called? If I forget what it was. Some about rubies were teardrops, some shit. Anyway, and I played kind of a really cool, almost Burton-esque solo, kind of bendy thing. And so the solo, he sits there and the solo comes. Now, Willie's a guitar player.
Yeah, no, he's
right. He loves guitar. Oof. So he's sitting there and the guitar solo goes by and he goes like this and turns in his chair to look at me. Right. And he goes, he thought this was all a Nashville recording. He didn't know Dwight from fucking Milky the Clown. He was like, where do you record? You guys are all in Nashville, right? And it's like, no. So he goes, looks up at me and he goes, who played guitar on this? So he thought I was going to say Brent Mason or one of the Nashville hotshots, right? And so I said, well, I did. I knew he liked it, because he kind of, who played guitar on this? And I said, oh, I did, Willie. And he goes, and he kind of doesn't look at me. He just goes, I never worked with a producer who was a picker before. And I look over at Mickey while Willie's there just to make a joke. And I go, he called me a picker. It's like I wanted to get a t-shirt that said, Willie Nelson called me a picker. So he goes, so then because he liked the solo, he knew that I was more than a record producer and he knew I knew music. And he goes, can I do this again? And I went, yeah, sure, go ahead. He knew that I knew. From so listening to the song.
He went out into the vocal booth and did another take.
Did it right. He did it till we needed it.
Right.
And when he went out the door and went back in the room, I looked at Mickey again. I go, he called me a picker. And Mickey was laughing. And he's like, yeah.
That's high praise. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Praise doesn't get much higher as far.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. He called me a picker. So I was like, wow. Now that was a big studio moment was that. I had some with Buck. Where Buck was
what a legend.
Yeah, he would acquiesce to me finally because he first came in. He thought it was 1965. He was going to sing and go get a donut. And it was like, dude, you're not even fucking close. And we're like, yeah, it's okay. And then, he was all hot dog and bravado, right? Because we had sort of drug him out of retirement and we're at Capitol Studios and it's like the latest, greatest everything. And we're hot, we're multi-platinum. And he's like, comes in like, and he's like, I'm going to pull this off. And we're like, yeah, maybe not. But we didn't say anything to him. And then he called back the next day and he goes, hey, Pete, it's Buck. And I said, yeah, Buck. And he goes, I don't think I did too good of a job. Can I come back down and sing it again? And I went, yes, you can. And then he got to experience modern recording because then he let me grind him.
Right.
Then he listened to me. Was that good enough? What do I got to do? And I do this, Buck, do that. Let me get this. And we were all working to get the comp together, make it happen,
Right.
So that was, being friends with Buck was huge.
Well, I mean,
That
he's
was,
used to cutting songs live, right?
yeah, they would go in, he'd be in behind a gobo with a mic, and the band would be out on the floor, and I knew Tom Brumley really well, the steel player for Buck, and he said Buck used to tell him, don't play anything you can't play on the first take, because I'm going to go play golf in about an hour. let's get this done, because I'm going to go play golf. And they go, okay, Chief. They called him Chief. All right, Chief. I've got a tiger by the tail. How was that?
Classics.
Yeah.
Classics. While we're on the subject of studio stuff, do you recall what you used for an amp on Little Things?
Little Ways?
Little Ways? That's you on baritone, yeah?
Yeah.
Because that is like it's a crazy tone.
It's a Blackface Deluxe.
It is.
Yeah.
I thought maybe it was something even smaller.
No, it's a Blackface Deluxe.
Just wound up.
And I made a baritone. I made one. I was learning about baritone guitars. I knew about Jerry Jones's, Dan Electroberry's. There were no new ones then. They were just vintage ones.
Right.
I didn't really have access to one. So I did a put together Telecaster, nothing special. I went to the music store and bought some really big strings and ended up tuned down to A. I went to my guitar tech and he did a special thing on the bridge because I had a bass string on there. So it's an A below E, like the E guitar. It's like A below E. So it's a fifth below the guitar. So it was a Telecaster guitar, Telecaster scale length with huge fat strings on it tuned down to A. Then the guys at the studio figured out a way to go in and trigger the tremolo, because the tremolo has a switch that turns it on and off, right?
Yeah.
They got an oscillator that took every hit from the snare drum and re-triggered the tremolo. So it was in time with the snare drum. So the speed is kooky. The speed is not what you would normally do. I mean, we cut to a click, but still it was re-triggering at every snare drum hit.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah.
It was like some kind of envelope. It would open up an envelope that triggered the.
Yep.
Right. Wow.
Just the tremolo was going and it would just open and shut the door. Bowl.
It's such a distinctive baritone. I mean, I'm a big fan of baritone guitar, but
yeah,
that particular tone is just like, it's first of all perfectly executed, like through the verse and everything. You have your melody solo,
right?
It just perfect placement. Like you weren't hot dogging it.
No, you got to choose your spots. Where you can definitely outplay the track, which is not what you're hired to do, and it's actually detrimental to the track. So you have to subjugate what you play.
If you want to be on the next track.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you want to be good, if you really want to be good, some people don't care about good. They care about themselves and if you care about what other guitar players are going to think about you, then you're not going to do your job. You're going to play shit that only guitar players, hey, listen to what he did. Anything the guitar players hear that they like of what I did was because I served the song.
Right.
And so I knew that I was going to have, more than one session in my life. Right. So I'll get another chance. Something will fall in my lap. Something will happen and I'll play something, kooky, or I'll play something technically proficient, that people look up to, but I'm not trying to do that.
Right.
Like the intro to Ain't That Lonely Yet is like, oh, this intro is like, it's an arpeggiate. So I arpeggiated the turnaround is all I did. but it's like those two arpeggios. Everybody's, oh, it's such a beautiful intro. It's like it's just an arpeggio. I remember Larry Carlton when I went to MI and GIT, and he was in a seminar, and he was talking about "Help Me, You Know I'm Falling" by Joni Mitchell, and he said all that is a major 7 chord. I just went, bring. But he got famous for it, but he just served the song, played a backwards major 7 chord, bring, help me, think I'm falling. Perfect. That's what you're hired to do if you pay attention.
And when you hire someone, you want them to do something perfect too. But we're all human.
Yeah, right.
Every once in a while, we all get lucky, right?
Right. Exactly.
Incredible. What's the first thing you're gonna do when you're able to gig again?
Well, my number one gig is every Monday night I play a Moose Lodge in Burbank. And it's not the room with the moose on the wall. It's a very cool little bar, low ceiling, black sparkly ceiling, vintage bar. Looks like it was built in the mid 50s. Red leather booths and chairs and seats, a pool table that's not in use when I play. And I'm in one end of the room, and it holds 50 people. Is super packed in there, shoulder to shoulder. So I've been playing there up until the pandemic for about 8 years, and it's my touchstone. It's my every Monday. I go in there used to go in there basically with an organ trio, a keyboard player who played key bass, and a drummer, and play my music. So I'd use the PA1 guitar, the hollow body, and I play slide or little harmonica, play some baritone, and play all my Reverend guitars that are my models. And
Got one back
then I
there,
have
buddy.
What? Yep.
Yeah, well, you see that?
The silver sparkle.
Yeah,
that's a eastsider-s.
yeah, that's right.
That's a badass guitar.
I love it.
Yep, that's a good guitar. So I play my guitars and play my music, and it's almost all original. There's a couple covers we do, but it's almost all songs off my records. So I'm gearing up to do that again. I'm just downsizing my gear. I'm playing through a Fractal. I've been playing through a Fractal for a couple of years. And I got a 212 cabinet. One side's wet and one side's dry, but 212s in one cabinet but it's stereo speakers. And just getting ready to do that.
How's transition been for you? Because I mean, is that the first modeler that you've used?
No, I've played a lot of
Line 6 stuff back in the day.
Yeah, Amp Farm. I used Amp Farm in the computer. I left off with deluxes, and I had a Vox AC30. I played a little bit when I needed distortion, but I'm really a Fender guy. I toured with analog amps, and then the end of the touring with Dwight, I was using the fancy head made by Line 6. I forget what it's called. Hey, Kevin, what's the name of that amp head we used at the end of Yoakam? Huh? Veta.
Right.
The Veta. I had a Veta head. I programmed the whole show in there, and went wet and dry. But then I switched. When I started doing I quit Dwight. I went on the road with an artist on my label, and we were doing like late 50s honky tonk. And I used 2 Line 6s with a 112 in each, just the old ones. And I programmed all the effects inside. So I just walked through and have a click track and have my delays timed. And then after that, I went to start playing the Moose Lodge, and I went through an incarnation, and I ended up for quite a while with 2 pods. So I had 2 pods, wet and dry, and a big tube power amp, Stevie Fryette 9090. So I had wet and dry. I like the wet and dry gag. And then I ran out. The pods, I think, only program up to 35 programs, and I needed more. So then I switched over to the the Fractal.
I love that you've embraced technology so, you know, so much.
Yeah, well, if I can't hear it, I don't think anybody else can. So I got pretty good ears.
I'd say.
And so, some people go, "Oh, I could tell when you use pitch correct." I was like, "Bet you can't. I'll bet you any money you can't.
$20.
Come on to my studio and take the blindfold test and bring your checkbook.
Right.
Because if I can't hear it, you can't hear it."
Right. Do you think that your embracing of technology was like greased up a little bit so you could usher it in because you transitioned from you were making records on tape machines before Pro Tools.
Yes.
So, you know, you had already made that jump. I mean, when was the last time you made a tape edit?
25 years, 30 years ago, maybe, maybe more.
Do you think that made it easier to be accepting of, bringing technology into your rig?
No, I am not. I mean, when Pro Tools started and I was making records in analog, and I had to I first thought of Pro Tools only as an editing bay. Right. So I would take analog recordings, put them into Pro Tools, and then edit them. But as I saw, it gave me more and more control over being able to manipulate the tracks, basically pitch and time. So I could slow something down, relax it, not slow it down, but relax it, put it behind the beat, fix the pitch. And I remember doing a Sarah Evans record, and it was her first record, and she was singing a little out of tune. And I could fix it with an emulator, but the problem was going to be monumental. It would take a day to do a song because you had to sample the vocal line into the emulator, then by hand modulate it up or down to get the pitch right where you needed it. It was just very difficult. We were good at it. Dusty Wakeman
was to render everything, right?
Yeah, it was very difficult to do. And I remember being there one day and go, isn't there like I'm not computer literate, but I was seeing that this thing could do things. And I said, I remember asking one of the younger engineers, I says, isn't there a program that'll put the vocal in tune? And he goes, oh yeah, there's a thing called auto tune. I said, well, fucking go get it right now. Buy that motherfucker. So we got it. We started running the vocal through it and figuring out how it worked and got to pitch correct. So it's like, if it makes it easier to do, all this stuff that we do in digital recording is stuff that we did analog. It's just easier. So it's not that people weren't trying to do it.
Right.
It's just, it was difficult to do. Now it's easy to do. Everybody does it. So it's very competitive. Records are very competitive the way they're made. So I was one to say, I'm not going to sit here and squint under a lamp burning oil blubber when I can turn on a light. As long as I can see and it makes my job easier, I want to be part of that.
Are there not some old recordings because there are plenty of recordings from certainly from the 40s, the 50s, and absolutely in the 60s because everyone was so high. And the 70s, of course, the high was much more focused.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But there was shit that was so far out of tune. And when I hear it, sometimes it just makes my toes curl, but there's still a charm to it where I'm like, I'm not mad at that. But there are some things, there's some things that are just fucking offensive. And I wonder, there are records like Rolling Stones records. Some of them just like the performances are pretty magical,
right?
But also kind of garbage.
Yeah, some of this stuff sounds like demos. Yeah. I mean, I've listened to some, like a Waylon record. Like, we love Waylon, and you'll put something on, and it's like, this sounds like a demo cut on a cassette.
Right.
So,
but
yes.
But there's a lot of stuff that's really out of tune.
Yes. Yeah. The more I learn, the harder it is for me to listen. Now, if I'm listening to jazz, I'm listening to people that were accomplished. There's a lot more stuff that's in tune. Like I'll listen to jazz records from the late 50s and early 60s, and I'm fucking amazed at the solo. That the whole track is live and they played it incredibly, and you're like, damn, those motherfuckers were good. They could really burn, they could really play. So there's like that peak of, where I think the disco era and the drum box came in and it started to automate things. And then of course pitch correct made everybody aware of pitch. And then I think it's more of youthful and popular music of the late 60s, early 70s is where there's a lot of out of tune shit. There's out of tune stuff in the 50s, but not as much, because when I was a kid, when I was 12 or 13 years old and I went to a record store, it was about as big as my bedroom.
Right.
It wasn't like fucking shit everywhere, because you know what? There weren't that many good people. It was like, I go to the jazz section, it was like 30 records. Okay, no new jazz. Okay, go through the country section. Yeah, 25 records. Okay, go through the blues section. Okay, 25. That was it. It wasn't hundreds of records.
When to cut a record back then was like there was a much more difficult entry point, right?
Yeah, and if you couldn't sing, play, or do it, you didn't make a record.
Right.
You weren't allowed in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, no, sorry, you're no good. So there's that period of time, that period of time where there was some real excellence. And then when the baby boomers, my age group, got to of age of buying records, they started signing baby boomer bands. And the baby boomer bands were culturally a success, but they weren't really qualified musically. They weren't that good, but they were of that culture. So we bought the record.
Right.
We were the same age. Jefferson Airplane or this guy or, Riders of the Purple Sage or whoever, we're all the same age group. It's just, we didn't want to hear an old man backing up some kid in New Riders of the Purple Sage. We wanted to hear the whole band. It was a phenomenon.
Right. Is there any band is there any person, singer, that you wish you could have done a gig with that you didn't get the opportunity? And is there any contemporary artist that you're really fired up about?
As far as like anybody that I wished I would have worked with, I kind of got over that. I used to think that I did, and I got to work with Jackson Browne, and I was sort of a fan of his and loved his music. And it was such an excruciating experience that I just don't want to do this. I don't want to work with, I just, whatever comes my way that's new and exciting and I'll work with it. But working, wishing I could have worked with B.B. King, or wishing I could have worked with Muddy Waters. I mean, I worked with Buck Owens, but we didn't make a record. He came in and did vocals and we were buddies, but, and that was always fun. But I kind of got over that. I had that for a while. Why can't I produce Bonnie Raitt? Why can't I produce Jackson Browne? I was in that era when I was being mentioned amongst other producers, but I got over it. It was like, nah, it don't work that way. So that would be, there is nobody. And then as far as like, what was the last part of the question?
If there are any contemporary that kind of like get your ears greased.
I have to scour my brain. Not really. Not that there aren't good ones, but I don't, the pipeline of getting new music to me, right, as a listener, just as Joe Blow on the street, I'm not tuned into that pipeline, right? So I'm not as aware. I'll see a new band or hear about a new band. They're not on television. I mean, Josh Stone or somebody like that, but it's, Alicia Keys is like, she's okay. She sings out of tune. she's all right, but I mean, is she, Aretha Franklin or Roberta Flack or, Donny I mean, no, it's not. So I only have so much time in my life and so much oxygen. So it's like, instead of listening to somebody that wants to sound like they play like Wes Montgomery, I'd rather listen to Wes Montgomery, right? So most everything I listen to is dead people.
Right.
And I'm always amazed by it, and also amazed by, Wes was in his 40s when he died. I mean, some of these guys didn't live very long, and they were like, they were gods. They were exemplary in what they did. Trying to think if there's anybody that thrills me. Seth, that guy Seth. What's his last name? He's a kind of bluesy singer. He kind of got off the track, but the first couple of records he made I really liked, and I can't think of his last name. Seth something.
I don't know anyone named Seth.
But not that I have a go-to that I go, hey, let me check out what so-and-so's doing. No, the answer is no. Doesn't mean they're not there. I don't want anybody to,
Yeah, of course,
feel hurt.
I'm not particularly tuned in. I mean, there's so much shit right now.
Right.
More shit than ever, right?
Yeah.
More people playing, learning licks, learning their licks on YouTube.
And the filter is so gigantic that it lets everything in. So you're kind of like, oh,
yeah.
This is supposed to be the new thing. I don't think so.
Yeah. I'm usually the person that resists whatever that, when people are like, oh, this is the best new thing, and I just automatically am like, I doubt it. I doubt it before I hear it. I'm that asshole.
I doubt it. Yeah, maybe not. I mean, still nobody's topped Little Walter. Little Walter's, been dead since 1965 or something on harmonica, and it's only got 10 holes and 20 notes, and people only play the first 6. Nobody's topped him. Nobody. So it's like, well, I've heard the best. I mean, maybe some will come along, but I've heard Muddy Waters, Ray Charles, Aretha Franklin, James Brown. I mean, I saw that James Brown movie the other day with that kid, Bozeman.
Right.
And it's just phenomenal. And even though he's imitating James Brown, but it's like, how great was James Brown?
What a stud.
How fucking great.
What a fucking maniac.
I know. Unbelievable.
Unreal.
So how do you top? I don't know that you top that, because, it's like topping Babe Ruth. How do you top Babe Ruth? Yeah, I can get a guy that took some steroids and hit more home runs than Babe Ruth. But in the reality of the essence of Babe Ruth, of what he did when he existed, it's a freak.
Right.
It's a freak of nature. Like, what? And he was a pitcher. He stopped pitching because they had to keep him in the lineup.
Right.
I mean, he hit a home run every 9 times at bat. That's crazy.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
fucking crazy.
I'm not far from the Baseball Hall of Fame or the Baseball Museum.
Yeah, you should go. I'd love to go someday. I'm sure it's amazing.
I was twice in the last month. I was 30 minutes away from there because I had to drive up there to get vaccinated.
How did you end up leaving Seattle and going to where you are?
I got married to a New York gal.
It was a girl.
Yeah.
All right. Sometimes it's food, career, or girl.
She was not coming to Seattle, and I was ready for a change. I was looking at I was either going to go to Eastern Washington and just live a country life, or I was going to go to LA and kind of maybe try and have another hurrah, see if I couldn't make something happen. And then this happened. So
how long did you work at the guitar store?
Couple 2-3 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was doing that teaching kids and doing some fishman work, and then also playing in a live karaoke band,
Uh-huh. Yep.
which was crazy. That was
Good
like,
practice.
that was my education. It was like a
Good.
500
Yeah.
song set or list, and anything could get picked.
That's awesome.
Uh, I wore a beard when I first got the gig, and I was so stressed out trying to learn all the songs that I started to get alopecia in my beard. It just
Oh,
started falling out. I was
oh
so
no.
stressed out. And the other guys in the band were like, "What are you doing? Well, like, what's wrong with you?" I was like, "I'm just all fucking bowed up trying to learn all these damn songs, right?" And
Right.
they were like, "Why are you doing that? Just listen to them." I was like, "Oh, just listen." First of all, everyone's so drunk to come to
Right.
karaoke. They think when we do guitarist Cadillacs, they think that it sounds just like it, whether it does or not. So just you know, listen, listen like what you did.
Yeah.
Listen and make notes, and that was probably the biggest education that I ever
That's
got
sure.
in music.
Sure it was. Great opportunity. You
Yeah.
get paid to hold your instrument and learn music.
Oh, you know what? There's there's nothing I love more.
Yeah, that's it. Now, do you play where you are now?
I'm going. Actually, I'm Saturday. I'm driving to Pennsylvania, to Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, to go check out a potential gig. It's a
Cool.
cover band gig,
Good.
playing bass,
Good.
and it's a paying gig. It's a good paying gig, and it's a weekends only gig, and I got a day job, and so you know,
Good.
win as far as I'm concerned. So we'll
Yeah,
see how it goes.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That ought to be
Um,
fun.
well, Pete, I really appreciate you giving me so much time tonight.
No problem. Nice to see you.
Um, man, I had a great time talking with you, and
Right.
I hope I hope that things get opened back up, and I'm gonna be traveling around the country a bit, working on a new iteration of this show that
Good.
basically live, and I sure hope that I'm out there on a Monday. It's Monday that
Yeah,
you're gonna be.
every Monday around 8 o'clock.
I'd sure like to get the chance to come out and see you play some more.
Oh, it'd be fun. We have a great time. It's
Oh,
always a good band. Gonna have a great band this year.
amazing.
Right.
Well, yeah, thanks again so much. I'll plug this guitar again because I got this last year, um, and it's been a treat to play.
It's a
And
fun one.
I'll talk about it up in the at the top in the intro. I'll talk about
Okay.
your signatures over there, Reverend.
Great. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, man.
Keep you posted.
Excellent.
I got a book coming out. I'll keep you posted on it.
Oh, please do.
How to produce a record.
Is that right?
That's what it's called.
How far into this are you?
It's done.
It's
I'm
done.
just doing the I'm doing the I it's got an accompanying DVD with it. The book is written. Mike Melenda from Guitar Player edited it.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of mine did the DVD, and then I sent it to a guy to it's doing the layout now, the art layout for the book, how it looks and stuff. So that's where we're at now, is just laying it out.
Do you have any idea of release? Anything slated?
No, not till I got to get my hands on it art wise and see what it looks like. And then I'm sure I'll just do self-publishing.
Yeah.
So I'll have to cross that bridge when I come to it,
Sure.
figure it out. But I'm going to circle back to all like people like yourself that I've done podcasts with and send the book, and then see if I can get on and talk about it.
Wonderful. Well, I definitely look forward to that.
Yeah, it's fun. There's some fun stories in there.
There will be.
All right. Well, take care of yourselves. Thanks for asking me.
All right, bud. Have a great night.
You too, buddy.
Bye.
Good night.